Net Live, bringing up the debut of Michelle Medlock Adams. She is in our green room, standing by, ready to go. YouTube live stream is locked on and in sync, and we have all of our cameras are aimed. They are in focus. Monitors 1 and 2 standing by. We're ready to go to the studio in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What is America? Well, welcome to PJ Net Live, and it is a very special night, as all of them are. But tonight, here's why tonight is special. Let me just say it that way. Tonight, we have, for the first time, the debut of Michelle Medlock Adams. Now, if you can see behind me, that is actually the cover of one of her 90-some-odd books. But it's a relatively new book, and she is going to tell us not just what the book is about. She's going to tell us a little bit about why she thinks it's important that she write it. So we're going to make a little room for Michelle now and set her right over, well, there and there, like that. There we go. And she is in our green room, and she is smiling. I can't wait any longer. We've got to bring her on board. Michelle, welcome to PJ Net Live. I'm just beside myself, excited about the future with you as a member of our team. You've written 90 books. This is one of your more recent. What is America?
That's right. This is my latest children's book. I write both for mostly are faith-based books for women and for children. And I love writing for kids. It's one of my favorite things to do. And this book is very special. And I think the reason it's important to talk about right now is because we're getting close to the 4th of July, just a few weeks out. And that's why they're doing kind of a big promo for it. But I've been talking about this for a year because that's about how long ago I turned it in. You know, that takes a while to do all of the artwork. Somebody else does that. Amy Wummer does that. I just do the words. But I thought, boy, with you as the co-host here talking about patriotism, that'll be a fun topic.
It is. Now, this book, I went to my local Walmart today to look for it. Didn't see it there. We have, I think, 4 Walmarts. Maybe it'll be at one of the others. But this is not just something you order from Amazon or right. Something like that. You can get it at retail stores, right?
That's right. Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere books are sold. Some of my other What Is series have been in stores like Meijer's and TJ Maxx and Target, lots of other stores. But we know for sure that Walmart picked it up. And next year, Cracker Barrel. So we didn't get it in time for this year, but yeah. So we're pretty excited about that. I love talking about America. I love talking about to children. I go into schools a lot and speak to them about being a writer. And this is a fun book to talk to them about. You know, I think the reason it was important to talk about this today is it seems like we sort of lost a little bit of that patriotism with our kids. You know, when my girls were growing up, now my girls are now 24 and going to be 27.
You're actually a grandmother, aren't you?
I am. In fact, I have.
I can't believe that.
So excited! A little boy, grandson that's going to be 2 in August, and then a granddaughter that's 6 months now, and then a brand new one. My youngest daughter Allison just had a baby. She's 5 weeks old today. So yeah, they're precious.
Do you have any pictures?
Oh, you know I do. I've got so many. But I mean, I'll make sure I send them so you can put them up next time. Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. In fact, Rin, which is the littlest one, had her first photo shoot today. So this Gigi is so proud.
I saw it on Facebook, and so did right? Everybody else. And
I know. It's like the largest brag book in America, on Facebook. It's the best thing. But seriously, when my girls were growing up, we lived in Texas then, in Fort Worth, Texas. And they would say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then they would say the Pledge to the Texas flag, because that was important in Texas. And the national anthem, it was played before every game. And, you took your hat off if you were wearing a hat. My girls were both cheerleaders, like their mama. And, they stood with their hand. In cheerleaders, they don't do it with their heart. They do it right here.
Right.
And so, we raise kids to respect the flag and to be grateful to be in America. And I think we've lost a little bit of that. And, this generation just doesn't have to do that in the schools anymore. And so anyway, that was one of the reasons I wanted to write this book, was just to bring some of that back and let kids have that feeling of patriotism that some generations had that maybe they don't have now.
Well, since I have a feeling that most of the people watching this are adults, so
Yeah.
You can you reveal what's actually in the book?
Yes, yes, I could. Yes, I mean, I actually, happen to have a copy right here. I'll tell the reason how this all came about. I was teaching at a Florida Christian Writers Conference in Lake Yale area. They got some big bass in Lake Yale, so I wasn't there fishing, though I wanted to be. I was there actually teaching at a conference about writing for children. And after we left that conference, my agent, his name was Kyle Young, and his wife Patty, and my good friend Wendy Lanier and her daughter, who works at Disney, said, "Hey, I've got free tickets. Why don't you guys come over to Disney for the day?" Well, how do you say no to free tickets to Disney World, right? So we did. We drove over a couple hours, and we chose to go to Epcot that day. I hadn't been to Epcot since I was little, but when we got in there, it was really hot, and we went to this the American Experience. I think it's called the American Adventure. Have you ever been to that?
Actually, I was a disc jockey at before when Epcot opened, and
Oh
they
wow!
sent an invitation to anybody who was on the air before it actually opened. We were able to spend an entire day and evening
Wow!
there in Epcot, which stands for Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow.
I don't think I even knew that. Wow!
Well, if you are ever on a game show and that is the
Wow!
winning question, I have my hand out. Okay, that,
Yes, I'm gonna have to like phone a friend. You'll be the friend. You
right?
apparently know
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
But yes, I've been that. But that was the. I think I went one more time as part of grad night or something like that. But I haven't been in. Well, that would have been about 40 years ago. Now my wife just got back from there.
I love it.
She took our daughter down there for her 21st birthday. So anyway,
Aw.
yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful. Well, I hadn't been in many years. At least I hadn't been to that particular park, the Magic Kingdom, but not to Epcot. So we went into this American Adventure, and I don't know if you remember that one, but it's like the animatronics. I think that's what they call it, where it's this music show, and then they have these characters come up out of the floor, and it really looks like they're real people. I mean, it was pretty cool. And they told the whole history of America. They talked about the struggles and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the things that we've been through as a country. And I mean, it was just one of those emotional times. I looked down the row, and there was all of us were all kind of weepy. I mean, it was very emotional. It was very stirring. And we left there. As we walked outside, we walked down the stairs back towards where everybody was. And I looked at Kyle, my agent, and I said, "I'm going to write something about this. I want to write something for kids." And he said, "Well, you should." And I did. I said, "I'm going to write something for kids. I want them to feel exactly the way I feel right now. I want them to have that feeling of being so grateful to be an American, of being so grateful to live in this country, and that freedom isn't free. Like, I want them to know this. I don't know if they know it, but I want them to know it. I want to be able to tell them in a way that they can digest it." And so I honestly wrote most of that book as we walked through the park that day. It just, that just happens. When you're a writer, you're always writing. And I did. And it's true. When I got back, I wrote the little book, and this is it. And so I don't want this just to be a commercial about this book, but what I wanted to talk about was, I think it's so important that we raise patriotic children and grandchildren to be able to read these words to them, and let them know about all the symbols of America, and that it's not just about the symbols. It's not just about the flag. It's not just about the bald eagle. It's not just about the anthem and the stars and stripes. It's so much more. Our country was founded on faith. That's what it says in the book. And yeah, so this has been a big, I don't know, a really important book to me. I live in the Midwest. We are in one of those flyover states, right? That we often don't get recognized or talked about much unless you're talking about farm. We have a lot of farmland here, but we're so important. And I think here in the heartland, I'm a Hoosier. We are quite patriotic. It's nothing to see a barn painted with a big flag on the side, and we live on the corner of a street here where every year for the 4th of July, all the parade floats line up right in front of my house. So it's like, I mean, in order to be a parade float, all you have to do is like get a number. So there's like people walking their dogs with just like a flag, bandana around their scarf. You can't make this stuff up. They're on a John Deere tractor with holding a flag. That's a float. I mean, I love it so much. And so we just sit out there in our lawn chairs and we watch this, and we love it so much. We just cheer for everything. And it's called our Heritage Parade. And so I guess I've grown up with just this complete sense of love for this country. And it makes me really sad when people don't share it. So that I thought, who's going to be reading this book to the kids? It'll be adults, right? So if we
Okay.
can, maybe the adults will read this, and no matter whether they are which polar opposite, if they're a Democrat or a Republican or somewhere in between, that they'll have a sense of unity. That's my hope for this book. Not just to raise patriotic kids, but also to maybe the parents or the grandparents who are reading it, that they'll like stop arguing with everybody and just realize that we're all Americans, bottom line. So, I mean, I know that's a lot of big wishes for a little book, but there have been stranger things happen. So that's my hope.
Well, I think it's important, as you do, because several things are happening that concern me as a patriotic citizen and as a believer. First of all, history, it seems, is being rewritten. I'm involved in some of the anti-Common Core movement, particularly in the state of Alabama. And one of the disturbing things about the history books that are being taught now, at least in that state, or in some of the schools in that state, is it talks about how the war ended, the atomic bomb and the massacre and the carnage and the genocide. You know, they portray the United States as that being an act of genocide. Now, they don't point out, of course, the military fact is it would have cost almost 1 million lives to end that war. That's a little bit beyond maybe a 7th or 8th grader to understand, but here's what ticks me off. This chaps my hind parts. They don't tell how the war started. I mean, if you're going to tell how the war ended, wouldn't it at least be fair to say how it started? I mean, and that's just one example of this kind of revisionist history that's being taught. The other thing that concerns me, or at least I observe with a sense of caution, is from time to time you'll hear the phrase, and conservatives and liberals alike use this phrase, that's not who we are as Americans. You ever heard that?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, the problem is what that means to me and what that means to the other person might in fact be two very different things. So I think it's important that we anchor, like this book does at a young age. You know, what is America?
Right.
We didn't start America to feed, you know, to give away money. We started it because we were seeking religious freedom. In fact, I heard I'm not letting you talk.
No, this is good. This is exactly right.
Okay, I heard a sermon one time, very profound. Okay, the English and the Spanish were both at the same time exploring the Western Hemisphere that had been discovered. One country set out in search of gold and discovered Mexico and South America. That would be Spain. The other one was in search of God. And look how history kind of unfolded after that, because the Spanish exploration and dominance in the world kind of, you know, receded because they were in fact seeking gold.
Interesting.
Where the pilgrims were seeking God. Pretty good sermon. I didn't make that up.
I
heard it. I heard it. What age groups would be interested in a book like What is America?
Yeah, and this is a board book, so that's like, you know, those hard kind of books that you can slobber on, spill your juice box on. You know, these are.
Is that
these
why
are
they
great.
do that? I thought
That's
it was for Okay.
durability. Yes, you can drop it. I mean, you really can't destroy these. You can't bend the pages.
Yeah.
So they say like 2
they
to
can
5.
spit up on it. You ever notice that?
Yes, they can.
Children spit up, adults puke or vomit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm not into any of that. None of those things are. I don't want any part of that. But yes, you're right. You can wipe these right off if that happens to this book. So 2 to 5, they say, is the right age group. But you know, I was just doing a signing of this book at the Book Expo where Dell, who was on last night, Dell Didway, he was also signing his latest book, Dugout Devotion. So we were both there in New York City signing books at Book Expo. It was really fun. In fact, we were helping each other. I'd be out in the aisles going, this makes a great Father's Day gift. You like baseball? Come on in, Dell, sign your book. I mean, I needed, you know, popcorn and peanuts or something too out there. And then he was doing the same with my book because we're friends, even though we bicker like brother and sister, but we are really good friends. Yeah. So I was there signing, and there was some people, you know, they got in line, and I would sign it. Who should I sign this to? And one lady got in line, and she said, my daughter. And I said, how old is she? Thinking she'd say like 2 or 3 or 4, because I had all these, you know, people buying them for little kids, or they were just taking them. They didn't have to buy them. And she said, she's 11. And I thought, okay. I said, well, it's probably a little bit young for her, but, you know, still, I'm happy to sign it to her. And she said, well, you don't understand. English is her second language. She's just learning it. And I thought, oh, I love that so much, right? It just, my heart smiled. I'm like, oh, that's great. So I signed it to her. So, I mean, it's really for like 5 and under, but it could be for anybody, really. So It's very exciting. I think one of the things that I was going to talk about was was we were raising the girls in Texas. We went to a church out there, every Sunday and Wednesday. Pretty much anytime the doors were open, we were there. We liked the kids to be in church. And I remember this one sermon. You were just talking about a sermon you heard. This one sermon, the pastor said, I think it's something that anytime you see a man or woman in uniform, um, just secretly buy their lunch or their dinner. Like if you happen to be out in a restaurant, he said he'd made it a practice to do that ever since he was like in his 20s, and this man was probably in his 60s. And I thought that is such a small thing that we could do, because here's the thing: if you do it and they know about it, usually they're so humble, they don't want that. I mean, I've thanked people who are in uniform in the airport before, and they're like, nah, they get all embarrassed. They don't want you to say much. Although I still thank them. I feel like I want to do that. But we adopted that in our family. So, if we go out to dinner and we see somebody who's in the military and they're in their uniform, because that's the only way you would know, we'll just secretly tell the waitress, hey, put their check on ours. And I think that's something that's a small thing we can do, just to be grateful, just to show patriotism. But that's something we can all do. I think that's just a small token of our appreciation. And my girls, they have adopted that. Like, they love that. And my son-in-law, Wes, is actually in the military. So we love America.
Well,
yeah,
something
so I
I
was
do.
excited to write this.
I do this all year long. Anytime I can identify someone as a veteran. Now, most of the time they're just wearing a cap with the emblem
Right.
or the name of the vessel that they served on or whatever. Anytime, I don't care if I'm on the clock, I will stop what I'm doing and I will go up to that gentleman. It's usually a man, but it could be a woman, I guess.
Yeah.
And just look them straight in the eye and say, I want to take a moment to thank you for what you did for me and this country and your buddies.
Amen. I love that.
And the reactions vary. Okay, a
Yeah.
lot of times they're just, well, thank you. I was glad to do. Some of them get very emotional. Now, the one I remember the most is there was a veteran in a wheelchair, and he was going into a Chick-fil-A, and he was approaching the door. So I ran and got ahead of him and opened the door for him. And you know what? He said, I can do that myself, thank you. He said, I appreciate the gesture, but he said, I really can do this. Let me show
Wow.
you. I hurt his pride.
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't mean to,
I get it.
but he showed me.
Yeah, he was going to do it himself. But,
Yeah.
But your heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. I love when we reach out. Something I write about this, and I think it's in my They Call Me Mom book. I was in one of the, I think it is in that book that comes out in the fall. I write about this, but I'll tell you all about it. I was in the airport. It's been probably 10 years ago now. And we were trying to get home for Christmas. I had been out speaking in Texas, in Fort Worth, and we had moved back to Indiana, and I was trying to get home for Christmas. And there was a terrible snowstorm, as luck would have it in the Midwest. That happens a lot. And I had a layover in Chicago. Well, Chicago O'Hare, I mean, I've had every time that is not my favorite airport. I'm a Cubs fan, but not a big fan of their airport. Midway, I like better. So, but we had flown in there from Dallas, and then we were supposed to go from Chicago to Indianapolis. And there were no flights getting out. It was just shut down. There was ice everywhere. You couldn't rent a car. All we saw were cots lined up. I'm like, oh no, this is Christmas Eve. And I thought,
Oh, gosh.
we're not getting home. So, I mean, they gave us food vouchers, but then they closed the restaurants. I'm like, okay, this is not really helpful. I mean, it was just one of those nights where like, you thought, okay. And so people got madder and madder. I mean, I'm not kidding, Mark. People were like livid. You just heard people yelling, and they were yelling, they were like shaking the restaurants, trying to get open like they wanted to eat. And all we had were like crackers. And I mean, it was just terrible. And it got more volatile as the hours went. I thought, this is going to be the longest night in history. So it was my husband and myself, our cousin, and one of my daughters. My other daughter was staying with a friend back home. So I thought, I'm going to miss Christmas with one of my daughters. It was just awful. And about that time, as people were getting more volatile and more mad, the last plane of the night came in, because they weren't letting anybody else leave or come in. And it was full of military personnel, the whole plane. Mm-hmm. And so as they walked in, you saw them filing in one by one. And everybody who'd been yelling and being ugly to each other, there was this hush that just came over the entire airport. And all of a sudden, I don't know who started it, this spontaneous clapping just happened. Mm-hmm. Everybody started clapping for them. It was the most emotional thing. I mean, I'm a crybaby anyway. I'm very, my heart, I wear it on my sleeve. But I mean, I was bawling. And every service, all the service people started crying. I mean, and
Really?
some of them, did to the Lord, like give it to him. And some just, said thank you. But it was just like, everybody, I think, realized at that moment, we're inconvenienced right now. but these guys get to come home for the holidays. Why don't we celebrate that? Let's celebrate something right now. It was such a wonderful, and that impacted me so much that I've told the story several times. I wrote about it because I'll never forget that feeling. Just like I will never forget how I felt that day at Epcot, just watching the history of our country on the big screen. So I think that's why books like What is America are important. If you've never experienced something like that, then maybe you will when you read this. Maybe you'll get that sense of patriotism. I feel like if more of us could experience those kinds of things, then the unity would happen again. I mean, think back to the last time that you watched TV and somebody wasn't yelling at somebody on whether you watch Fox News or MSNBC or what are the other ones, all the CNN. No matter what you watch, somebody's always mad at somebody. Like there's never unity. People, I don't care what the news story is, there'll be polar opposite views on it, right? All the time. And some of that's good, healthy dialogue. I'm not saying that's not, but boy, you just wish that you could find some common ground once in a while. And I don't think we've had that since maybe right after 9/11.
There you go.
We had that. Everybody came together. Didn't matter if you were Democrat or Republican, because we kind of had a common enemy at that point, and we were all like pro-America. I mean, people had. I mean, I remember wearing the little ribbon on my shirts. Everybody wore them. Everybody had their flags out, and they even allowed prayer. I mean, there was prayer on national TV on several of the stations, and I thought, wow, there's that scripture in the Bible that talks about how God can take something bad and turn it for good to those who love the Lord. That was happening. And I don't think we've had that since. And I certainly don't want another tragedy like that to happen to America. But I do wish we had that same unity that happened right after that happened. I wish we could have that coming together again.
An observation and I'm glad you brought that up because, I do work in church development in men's ministry in particular. And there's two kind of competing schools of thought. One is we're going to stay the same. We're going to dress in our choir robes and sing the old rugged cross, and people, something will happen. It'll bring people back. That's one school of thought. The other thought is to be culturally relevant, and use the style of worship that is more parallel with the lifestyle that people live, as long as you don't cross the line, wherever that is. And the people that cling to the old school of thought keep saying something to bring them back. Well, the observation I made was after 9/11, standing room only in churches. That's the good news.
Yeah.
The bad news is that lasted about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We kind of take God and put him on the shelf when we feel like we don't need him. But as soon as we need him, we go rushing there and we bring our broken toys to God like a little child to a father. Fix my broken toy.
Yeah.
And when the father fixes the toy, the kid takes it and goes playing with it. And Jesus told the story. He made the 10 blind people. Were they blind or lame? They had an infirmity. He healed all 10 of them, but yet only
lepers,
one.
Yeah.
Only one came back to say thank you. And I think that we, when we talk about unity, we also talk about diversity. These are polar opposites, yet e pluribus unum, from many one. It's on our currency. Let me ask you a question, Michelle. As when you post on social media, it's always good to get affirmations, retweets, or shares, or likes, or comments. Right. When you post a blog, I'm not a blogger, but I presume that you're feeding on those comments. You want feedback. When you do broadcasting, you have viewer statistics, to market shares, and you have, in other words, there's some observable metric or some observable fact that is affirming, and we all need affirmation. So you write this book, other than sales, how does it get? Have you ever had an experience where somebody comes back to you and just gives you that feeling you were talking about of inside your heart that yes. In spite of all the challenges, and even if things aren't going well with the book, if it does that kind of thing happen? And if so, how?
It does. And I think that's on those days, because there's days as writing that's a tough career. I mean, you're basically putting this child that you birthed. That's how you feel about every book you've written, and then you're giving it to somebody else to raise, and then you see it whenever it comes out, and you're excited. But not everybody's not everybody thinks your kid's cute. Did you know that? Like we laugh at my daughter Allison. They just had this new baby Ren, and she's beautiful. I mean, I think she is too. But after she was home a couple of days, she goes, "Mom, like she really is beautiful, right? Like we just don't think she is because she's ours. She really is pretty, right? Like it was just this epiphany that she had that everybody thinks their own kids are cute. Well, it's the same way with books. When you birth a book, you think your book is amazing, but not everybody's going to think it's amazing. So you're going to get some bad reviews, and you're going to get some people that don't like what you've written. That's just part of this business. You're going to get some rejection letters, but in the middle of all that, you have to remember why you did this. I mean, I didn't do this writing thing to get famous. I didn't do this writing thing to become, wealthy. There's not, I mean, it's great to make some money on your book so that you can continue to do that because I have to make a living. But I did it because I felt called to write. And that I could have done a lot of other things that would make a lot more money than this. But I did it because I felt like that was my calling. That was my purpose here. And part of that is writing for kids. I love to write for children. It's a noble calling. And kids are honest. They will give you feedback. I'll tell you that. They do not hold back. If they do not like it, you will know it. There would be no mistaking. They will know. You'll know. But I've had, especially when I speak at the schools, I have great feedback, and I've had some emails. There's a pastor friend of ours who lives down south, and one of his daughters was dealing with some panic issues. She was having some panic attacks, some anxiety, and I have a book out called "I Will Not Be Afraid." And I was reading some of his posts on social media, and I was just so burdened for her, and I've been praying for her. But I just felt prompted to send her a copy of my Will Not Be Afraid book that came out, like a long, long time ago, maybe 10, 11 years ago now. And I sent that copy because in that book, it addresses all the fears that kids might have. And there's a scripture to go with each fear. So, the word of God never returns void. That's what the Bible says. And I thought, I'll send this out. And later, I didn't think anything of it. I just was obedient to send it. I didn't follow up. And he told me later that they read that every night, so much so that he hasn't memorized. And that not only did it help him, but that she's not having panic attacks anymore. Now, here's the thing. It wasn't what I wrote, but it was the word of God in those books that transformed this little girl's heart. So I think when you know that if that book had just helped one little girl, this pastor, the friend of ours, that's daughter was having anxiety, I would have done that. I would have written that a million times over. That's why we do these kinds of things. So I feel like in a book like What is America, I guarantee you there'll be some people mad about it because of the topic. There'll be somebody mad about it. But I don't care. I would have written it anyway because I know there'll be somebody. There'll be one little girl, maybe the little girl who's learning English, that will take this book and it'll mean something to her. That's what the written word does for people. And yes, so we do get, as writers, you do get some of those. I don't think we'll know all of them until we get to heaven, but you do get to hear once in a while some good feedback, and it's enough. I can live on that for quite a while. So it's special.
I have from time to time people will come to me. I write software, so they've got this idea. They want me to write the software, and in other scenarios, they have a cause and they want to promote it on social media, and they want my help on that. And so I always start out by saying, understand that no one is more enthused about your idea than you are.
That's right.
And they nod their head. Yeah, and the reason I tell them that is say, now let me state that conversely. What that means is everybody in the world thinks less of your idea than you do.
You had to be the Donald Downer, didn't you? You had to bring that up.
Well, but I'm trying to give them perspective, because sometimes we don't see it clearly, and I get some really stupid ideas, and it's so that's how I kind of bring them back down to earth. But Michelle, it has been this is just the beginning. We have weeks and weeks ahead, and I can't wait to find out more. I didn't know that this book was part of a What Is series.
Yes.
So next week, whatever, and in our conversations before coming on the air, folks, I don't tell people what to talk about here. I try to exercise as little editorial control as possible. What I want our live guests to talk about is whatever the Lord has laid on their heart. Because what we do here at PJNet is share our walk with Christ. And each one of us has a walk with Christ. If you're a believer, if you're not a believer, I would invite you to maybe we can help you understand how we're able to walk through life and draw strength, not only from Christ, but from each other.
Right.
And but each of us have a different walk. And if you have a word of testimony or a story to share and you're watching this video, I would invite you to contact me. And if you want to share an inspirational story, we want to have good news here. We want to be encouraging. There's all kind of anger and hatred and divisiveness out there. But this is a place where we can come together and, well, just be friends and strengthen one another. Michelle, you are awesome. I can't
Thank
wait
you.
until next week. I've learned to not ask the question, what are we going to do next week? Because the answer is invariably, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Well,
I don't know.
I'll have to think about it.
All right. Well, stay nearby because we do want to do a test using your iPad instead of your
Okay.
phone. And we'll do that after we get off the air here in just a moment. Well, folks, that was the debut, Michelle Medlock Adams. And you can go, well, I think I won't even say it. She's on Facebook. She's on Twitter as IN Writer Girl, IN meaning Indiana, I presume. I'm pretty sure of that. And check her out. Check out her website and her books. And if there's a young person out there in preschool age, I hope that you will take the opportunity to check it out and find it and share it with your young one. And we will get back to our programming. Unborn Lives Matter is our hashtag for the night, and we will continue right here on PJ Net Live.